Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Count you down, and when I close the door, you can just start.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Should I continue from where I was going before, or just you want to
I think we
restart
should
the?
restart,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
3, 2, 1.
Hello, I'm Ting. I'm a political science major here at Rider, and today I'm here with Dalin Hackley.
Yep.
You want to talk a bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, real quick, I'm a senior double major in political science and global studies. Semi-involved around campus. I'm a member of the track and field team, but I'm on a few advisory boards for the Vice President of Student Affairs. I'm on the Student Advisory Board and for the President's Council on Inclusion as well. So, just a little bit of background, I guess, about myself, yeah.
And we take a class together.
Yes.
That's how I
Yes.
got the idea of asking you to come here, actually, because I think we disagree on just about, well, every consequential political issue there is. You just told me that you don't think we do. I feel like we have quite a few differences. Though.
I think we do have differences, yeah. But, yeah.
And I think it's very hard to focus that conversation without like a direction. So I wanted to start with something a bit trivial, which is what got us here at in the first place, which is that whole Chick-Fil-A incident. I'm gonna give my summary of the incident, and you can like elaborate on it and give your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So, Ryder sent out a poll about a month or two ago,
Yep.
asking for opinions on what restaurant they should have on campus.
Yep.
Students voted in favor of Chick-fil-A. It's my understanding they had the most votes.
I think I voted for Chick-fil-A too.
Yeah, I know I did. And a little while later, they sent out another poll, and they said, we're not going to have it after all because of its corporate values, right? I have my own thoughts on this, but I just wanted to get your take on that. You tell me, and I already know you think that there's a very good reason why they didn't choose to have them on campus. So if you could just talk a bit about that.
So in regards to their decision to not bring Chick-fil-A on campus, it definitely, in my opinion, is a very difficult decision. It's a very thin line to toe, right? Especially in regards when you're dealing with majority and minority, right? But the one aspect is, for the council that I'm a part of, for inclusion, I think that one of the biggest aspects that the campus is trying to, do, that the university is trying to do, is to develop a community in which everybody feels comfortable. And even if that is in the case of, the minority, although we do have, I would say, I don't know the specific numbers, right, but a pretty sizable LGBTQ community on campus. I don't know the specific numbers. You probably do.
I don't.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you did or not. But, it's nice to take into account the fact that they do have, they have their issues that they feel strongly about, just same way as different communities do as well. So in terms of the corporate values of Chick-fil-A, we all understand what they are, right? And we understand that the reason they're closed on Sundays is because they are relatively a religious corporation, and they as well have spoken out publicly against issues of same-sex marriage and other LGBTQ rights. Depending on how you feel about that is one thing, but it makes sense, at least, as to why the university decided not to bring them on campus.
Well, the individuals in charge of Chick-fil-A who run the company have spoken out in their personal capacities in opposition of same-sex marriage. And however we feel about that, and I'm pretty sure we feel the same way about that, I'm pretty sure we agree that that's their right.
Yeah.
But as a corporation, I'm not sure that translates to them being an anti-LGBT corporation. And the reason I say that is after the shooting in Orlando at Paul's nightclub, right? They were one of the few corporations to offer free food to the thousands of people who were lining up to donate blood to the victims who needed blood transfusions back then.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to go back to something else, because you said that you think one of the jobs of the campus administration is to make sure that students feel comfortable on the campus. Do you think that's true? Do you think that there's a line to be drawn between feeling safe and feeling comfortable? Because I'm not sure that having Chick-fil-A on campus would make students feel unsafe. I can see how it makes them feel uncomfortable, but I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. Students feeling uncomfortable on campus. Isn't discomfort part of the academic environment, to be thrown out of your comfort zone? to confront like truths and opinions and perspectives that you haven't heard before. Right. That's why
Yeah.
this sort of conversation is valuable.
Yeah,
Is it?
absolutely.
So I'm not sure that there's an important need here to carve out, just going back to the whole concept of safe spaces, or to
Yeah.
carve out safe spaces for students on campus so that they don't have to, in any way, shape, or form, have any confrontation or any encounter with.
Almost like a bubble, kind
Yeah,
of.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question is, what exactly does not having Chick-fil-A or any organization whose leaders, right, personally oppose the idea of same-sex marriage, for instance, how exactly does excluding them protect the LGBT community?
I don't know if necessarily I would go as far to say like it's in protection. I don't know if that was within the language that they used when they like had
No.
written their statement
So
in
you just
response.
think it's in support.
I think it's more of a support thing, right? It's like it's not that the issue of bringing Chick-fil-A on campus would have threatened the lives of the members of the LGBTQ community, right? I just think that in terms of like being supportive, like it's an active representation of, okay, we support you. We understand that you are members of our community. We are all members of one community, and as a whole, we kind of are meant to, or should at least, support each other. Now, I do completely understand, like, you know, the perspective of which people who are disagreeing and have dissent to that decision, you know, the idea of, you know, confrontation is a part of growth, right? Disagreeing and differing of an opinion is a part of growth. Like you said, this is what makes our conversation so valuable. And that's why I love having conversations like this, because it allows you to have difference of opinions and learn from them. But I do definitely think that it's still important to recognize, you know, like I said earlier, or kind of like before we were on camera or anything, that it is a very thin line to toe, right? And you've addressed that. Like, and I can't give you a perfect answer on that in any sense. But I just do think that it's more of like a support aspect in which you are showing that you care, you know, like we care. And when you have a corporation, as much as, you know, we like to look at a corporation as being a business that has people that are a part of it, in many aspects, depending, it's all about, you know, it's subjective. It's the way in which you view it, right? I could view a corporation as, you know, from the top down, you know, what are the values from the top down? And from the values from the top down, and, you know, financially, fiscally, you know, when they put money out to different groups that are in support of opposition of same-sex marriage and stuff like that, you know, that kind of shows not that the people who are working within the corporation, like when we go to Chick-fil-A, they're great people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that in any sense they're like, yo, you're not a human being, right? But it's just kind of like the idea, right? And I think, and again, that's why it's a thin line to toe, because ideas, you know, it gets blurry. There's a lot of gray area within that.
It's the politicizing of it that upsets me, right? It's because,
Yeah.
Look, they put out a poll. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know for a fact, you're right, how large the LGBT community is on this campus.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that we have a massive community. The majority of us want to support that community.
Yeah.
Right? And yet when they put out a poll, that question wasn't on our minds, right?
Yeah.
We voted in favor of Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And when it went viral, when news outlets started reporting on riders' response to it, everybody, judging from the backlash online, said, "No, we shouldn't have them on campus. We should definitely stand by our that community and support them and stand with them." What that tells me is that it wasn't a political issue in the first place. It doesn't bother anyone. And I would, you know, I would bet that a lot of gay people, a lot of you know, bisexual, transgender people would have voted in favor of Chick-fil-A, right? Who doesn't like fried chicken, you know? But the moment the school politicized it in that way, the moment we have to make something so trivial political, right? We infuse that sort of, I would say, unhealthy form of dialogue.
Okay.
Because people weren't making intellectual arguments online. They were really just
emotional arguments and
And I feel like that's just unnecessary politicizing. You know, like this had nothing to do with any community on campus, right? We weren't inviting an anti-gay group on campus, right? That would have been absolutely relevant to this discussion.
Yeah.
But it just seems like an odd marriage to me. Like there was a fried chicken chain, and we turned it into a political conversation. and it shouldn't have been that way. And that's something that we're doing increasingly often. I think that's just so unhealthy.
Yeah.
But what would you say to conservatives on campus? Do you feel like you said you serve on the Center for Diversity and Inclusion?
Well, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a part of a council that they're also kind of
Mhm.
like, spearheading. Yeah.
Do you think that conservatives are getting appropriate inclusion on campuses and on this campus in particular?
See, like, okay, I guess like where I would probably want to start from is, and I guess this is where I guess we have like the difference of opinion. You know, although like issues or it can become an issue. Not everything has to be an issue, and I totally agree with that. You know what I'm saying? And that is the argument of many conservatives that I've met, and that's why I'm also very good friends with many conservatives, because I'm not too far off with the idea of us politicizing everything, right?
Yeah.
But there is kind of there's a difficulty within that, because what may not be political to one individual, kind of the entire basis of our political communication course, right? Anything could be political communication.
Yeah.
And it again, like, that's I don't even know how to go about that, because like I said, it's a very thin line determining, okay, what is something in which is political and what is something in which we are politicizing, right? And an argument could be made for both sides. And for the political side, you could definitely argue just simply based off the perspective, because I do know members of the LGBTQ community, right, that are not necessarily in support of Chick-fil-A. I'm not talking about like on our campus, because I haven't gone around talking to people about this, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit, people have brought it a little too far, right? But I do know people who are uncomfortable, who won't go to Chick-fil-A, right? And so it's coming from that perspective, where it's like not something that people talk about every day from their own perspective, which is kind of why it isn't something that's necessarily on the forefront of others' minds when we're making these decisions, right? And so I think it's okay in the way in which they kind of decide their reasoning, because that is a reality for people, that they do not feel as if like Chick-fil-A is a place where they want to go to. And I completely understand, obviously it's a decision to be made by that individual on whether they go and eat there or not. But like, just kind of when there are other options, I guess the campus it's more so like better safe than sorry. And again, that like this is where like me and you aren't too far apart, because I understand that is difficult, right? And in many sides, I side with the opposition, the people who are upset about it in many cases. But, I think that it's important to respect and understand the perspective of those who aren't necessarily going to speak out that loud about it, right? It's something that they feel internally, they feel strongly about, passionately about, but it's not that they are going to go out their way to speak about it. Now, for the conservatives on campus, I completely I understand the idea, like in the simple ideal of democracy. If we're talking about something like simple majority, like if majority wants something, then give the majority what they want, right? But that, I think, is the one issue, and sometimes which I have with conservatism, where it doesn't necessarily always take into account like some of the ideals, like socially, in which how it can impact somebody, right? Not entirely, not that Republicans or conservatives feel as if they don't care
look,
about.
I'm not. Nobody's gonna die because Chick-fil-A
Yeah.
doesn't come to campus.
Yeah, no, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I guess, and I think what bothers me isn't like the specifics of that issue in itself. It's really if we can say that we're not bringing this to campus, right? Because having any entity on campus that espouses, not even the company itself that espouses those views. If there are individuals serving within the organization who prominently hold these views against this particular community, not even against a community, against their lifestyles, right? But who don't discriminate against them on a corporate level.
Okay.
Right. If we exclude them for the comfort of our students, right, because we don't want to risk that backlash and them not feeling safe and things like that. What does that say about the state of free speech on this campus? What about conservative students on this campus, right, who may want to express certain views? How do you feel about free speech on campus? what should students be allowed or not allowed to say?
I can't, and
Right.
we,
If in this conversation,
Yeah.
right, and I'm in full support of same-sex marriage and all that.
Yeah.
I'm saying if in this interview
on this
yeah,
issue, on this topic.
if I wasn't, right, and if I said in this conversation that I think it's wrong,
Yeah.
and Ryder in response said, all right, we definitely can air this in any form then,
Yeah.
right, because
Okay.
that's offensive to that community.
Mhm.
Right. How would you feel about that?
That is one of the things that internally, like, kind of like, I struggle to like choose a side. I feel like for me it's very topical. You know, it's like it depends on the situation.
Yeah, this situation.
This situation. If you were to openly, you know,
Yeah,
say,
I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
Like I said.
You know, like at the end of the day, like personally, I believe that you have the right to say how you feel.
Yeah.
But as well, Ryder is still a private institution with the ability to determine, you know, what they want
What is
to air and what they don't,
No,
right?
you're right.
And like,
you're right.
and so
Yeah.
in the same instance that we're talking about the issue of, you know, if we had Chick-Fil-A come on campus and members of the LGBTQ community would be able to decide whether they wanted to go or didn't want to go, it is still the right kind of the university to determine whether what they want to represent, what they feel as if they want to give out, right? And so, you know, there are limits to almost everybody in every situation.
But we're not talking about whether Ryder has the right to do it. We're talking
Yeah.
about whether they would be right to do it.
I mean, but
Right.
that
Yeah.
again is that kind of what I'm saying is that that's up to each individual, and in this case, we're talking about an institution. So you kind of have to view them almost as an individual as well, right? In the sense that they're making their own decision, right? And so it's like
Is
from
it
a
important
perspective,
to you
right?
personally that Ryder guarantees free speech to its students, no matter what their views are?
See, when it comes to free speech, and you know, and coming from my own personal experience, right, as a minority on campus, and you know, you experience things not on campus but in life all the time that you don't like to hear, don't want to hear, but you have to hear, right, or not, or you choose to hear, right? Like, I think it's difficult because at the end of the day, like, you know, everybody should have the right to say how they feel, but I think that it is also important to, in the maintenance of like kind of like stability in a sense, in certain situations, there are times where like kind of, and I hate to say this, but this is literally our society. Like, this happens all the time.
What happens all the time?
There's almost an infringement on free speech, and we know this, and I understand like kind of like where you're going with this, and I totally understand that because there is, right? It's almost in a sense the same idea as like when the Patriot Act passed, and you know, people were kind of giving up their rights to privacy in a sense for the betterment of our country as a whole, right? And I feel like there's an underlying kind